Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the LSU Sports Insider Podcast. Today is Thursday, August the 22nd. I'm Zach Ewing, along with Koki, Riley, Reed Darcey, and Monsieur Scott Rabalais, back from Paris. I'm super pumped about today's show. We're doing our LSU football season preview podcast. We're also going to talk briefly to Scott about his Olympic experience. This is his first time back in studio since he came back from Paris. So lots of excitement. Want to let you know, first of all, that today's show is brought to you by the Baton Rouge Clinic, your trusted healthcare provider in the heart of Baton Rouge. Whether you're in need of primary care, specialist services, or urgent care, the Baton Rouge Clinic has you covered with a team of dedicated and experienced professionals. Visit BatonRougeClinic.com to learn more or to schedule your appointment today. The Baton Rouge Clinic, caring for generations. Today's show also brought to you by Waste Pro. Tiger fans, if you're planning a tailgate or event, keep your guests comfortable with portable toilets from Waste Pro. Call 225-744-6400 and mention LSU Sports Insider for a special offer. So, right after this break, we're going to talk to Rab about his Olympic experience. We got our LSU/SEC football season preview right around the corner. Talk to you in a minute.
Football fans, with the Caesars Sportsbook app, you can be in the game all the time. Seeking instant action? Quick Picks offers you the most popular games and markets, already built for you and ready to bet. Experience the thrill when you stack your bets to create a super parlay. Build bets for your favorite teams and players across multiple games. This season, don't just watch the game. Download Caesars Sportsbook and experience the game like never before.
You know how far I've gone, now I'm home again. I'm feeling more alive these days than I've ever been.
At the Baton Rouge Clinic, our sole focus is to provide exceptional health care for your entire family so that you can get back to doing what you love most. We are caring for generations.
You gave me love, gave me love.
All right, this is the LSU Sports Insider. Back in our Baton Rouge studios. Want to start today, as I mentioned, Scott Rabalais back from Paris, from the Olympic experience. And really, I mean, I think the headline for locals is it was a big Olympics for LSU.
Yeah, there were about 36 athletes with LSU and Louisiana ties in the Olympics, and some of the biggest names, obviously people like Mondo Duplantis and Sha'Carri Richardson, Javon Harrison, who didn't do very well. He had a heel injury, didn't do well in the high jump. And then Kristen Nuss and Taryn Cloth in beach volleyball. So it was a lot to keep up with. There was a lot going on every single day, but every day was something exciting. And then you had the backdrop of this amazing city in Paris, which was just a huge bonus.
Yeah, take us behind the scenes, because I think most people never have attended an Olympics, much less covered one as media. What was the experience like, just kind of day to day? How did you handle things?
Yeah, we started. My day usually started at the main media center, which is on the western edge of Paris, not too far from the Arc de Triomphe, and they had buses that went from there to every venue. But sometimes I'd take the metro or the trains or something like that. So getting back in the evening was the hard part, because there was some late nights at the track stadium or at beach volleyball, and I spoke a lot of French, a lot of very crude French to taxi drivers, trying to get back to my hotel at like 2 o'clock in the morning. But then. Unlike what we have here, where you go to an LSU football game and everybody's got an assigned seat with a nameplate and all this stuff, it's general admission basically for the media. It's like there's all these, like at the track stadium at the Stade de France, there's like 1,500 seats for the media, and you just go find a seat and and you cover the thing. And then the part that I missed from what we usually do is you have this mixed zone where the athletes have to come off the playing surface or track or whatever, and they come through and they can stop or they don't have to, and they may give you a quote or they may not. And I was like, man, I just would love an old-fashioned LSU football post-game press conference right about now. But overall, it was a great experience, and to see some amazing things like Mondo Duplantis winning the gold medal again in the pole vault and breaking the world record, which has only happened 3 times in the Olympics in the men's pole vault, and just the venue that was the Eiffel Tower Stadium for beach volleyball, which was just spectacular. Those were really, really cool things. Yeah.
Trying to imagine Tiger Stadium with general admission, guys, after a full day's tailgate, like would not be a safe situation. Would not be safe.
No, the fans had assigned seats. We had general admission.
I'm still imagining it in my head. It's okay.
The press box too, and
Yeah.
we're glad you're back, Rab. We were kind of worried you'd stay over there. You wouldn't come back. So
I was kind of worried I was going to stay over there too.
I wouldn't have blamed you if you stayed over there. You know.
Well, we're going to use this to transition. Mondo, right after he broke the world record in the pole vault, compared on NBC in front, national TV audience. He compared the Stade de France to Tiger Stadium, to Death Valley at night. The crowd pop that he heard. Could you make that comparison? I mean, did the crowd pop sound like it did when LSU beat Alabama in overtime a couple years ago?
Well, I mean, track meets. First of all, if you ever been to any kind of track meet, it's just this.
Everything's going on.
Everything's going on at once. All kinds of events going on, running events and field events and all kinds of things. But it was just him. It was the end of the meet. It was just him making that last of the 3 leaps at 20 feet 6 inches, and I think they said 77,000 fans there, and it was kind of a. It kind of went down to a buzz, like maybe before, like somebody's attempting a field goal to win the game, right? Mm-hmm. You kind of a low buzz, and then the place just went off when he cleared the bar, and it was this amazing moment for him and for the fans, and the fact that he represents Sweden compared to being someone from France. Was immaterial at that point. Yeah, it reminded you of that, and it was late on a Saturday night too. It was very, very. There were some similarities for sure. I can see why you said that.
How do you say Death Valley in French?
Yeah.
I took enough French to where I should know this, and I just can't.
Valley is Mort de Valley.
Valley de Mort.
Valley de Mort. That would be it.
There we go. There we go. All right. Well, this is our season preview for 2024. Let's transition into football.
American football.
American football.
Yeah.
It starts on Saturday. We got a couple games on Saturday. Thomas Casale is going to talk about Georgia Tech versus Florida State in our sports betting segment later.
In Dublin.
In Dublin, back in Europe. And then the rest of the country kind of starts a week from tonight. There's some games next Thursday night, and obviously LSU on September the 1st, a week from Sunday against USC. So lots to talk about. Wilson Alexander, who's our football beat writer, is not here. He's in Houston as his wife Elise undergoes chemotherapy treatment. So our thoughts are with him. We all got the wristband on, Team Elise, but he did offer some predictions as well. So we're going to kind of go through what Wilson thinks as we kind of go through some predictions, some choices for breakout players. We're going to do LSU first, then we'll expand our horizons into the SEC and the national front with some predictions as well. So this is our 2024 season preview. When we come back on the LSU Sports Insider, it'll be game week. It'll be USC week next week. So we're going to dig into USC a lot against LSU. First of all, today's injury report, as we kind of wrap up training camp, guys. Today's injury report is brought to you by the Baton Rouge Clinic. And for the first time, we actually kind of have some guys, Reed, who are banged up. Nothing serious, but some LSU players missing practice.
Some nicks and bruises, some just minor issues. Nothing that it seems like will keep anyone out for the USC game. I'll just run through them real quick. Miles Frazier was in a boot yesterday, the right guard. He has a minor ankle injury, I believe. Chris Hilton, we saw him leave practice on Saturday. Turns out it's a bone bruise in either his foot or ankle. We're not sure. Sage Ryan has a little hamstring issue. He did not practice yesterday. J.K. Johnson, the transfer from Ohio State who didn't play last year, he ran with the ones in his place. And then West Weeks, the second team linebacker, he has a foot issue as well. We saw him in a boot as well. And then the freshman wide receiver, Jelani Watkins, he is still not practicing. Brian Kelly described his injury as like a foot/ankle sprain, not sure what. But he's been out for a decent chunk of camp, and we don't know how long that'll linger, but that's really it. Nothing long term, nothing Brian Kelly seemed to be particularly concerned about. So that's really it, and they should be as healthy as they could be going into the USC week.
Rab, obviously there's still a week and a half to go. Things could happen, but your number one goal in any preseason camp is to get through healthy, and it seems like LSU has, for the most part, they've done that.
Yeah, I mean, you're used to and almost expecting, unfortunately, to have someone with some kind of, season-ending, injury, a torn knee, a broken leg, or something like that. And obviously, they still have practices to go. I mean, they're going to kind of go behind their iron curtain, and not we won't see any more of their preparations leading up to the USC game, as they do a lot of installations of the game plan. So they still have a ways to go. But yeah, I think for a team with so much transition, so much that they're trying to work on and improve on from last year, that this has been as good as you could hope for, probably, because there's going to be some injuries, there's going to be some problems, but overall they've done pretty well.
Okay, so let's dig into LSU and what we think, and we'll give our record predictions. Koki and Reed and I all kind of did a little bit of this on Tuesday with our over-under podcast. But first, I want to kind of do something different for our Star Player segment today. And our Star Player segment is proudly sponsored by Waste Pro. Ensure your tailgate or event is a hit with clean and convenient portable toilets from Waste Pro. Rent yours today. The question is, who is LSU's best player? It's an obvious question last year. Jaden Daniels won the Heisman Trophy. Second time in 5 years we've had a Heisman winner at LSU. Less obvious this year, but it's funny. I asked all four of you, the three sitting here plus Wilson, and three of you mentioned Will Campbell, the offensive lineman. Koki, make the case for Will Campbell as the best player on LSU's team.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the boring pick, but he's just so consistent. And, gave him 0 sacks last season, despite just being a second-year sophomore, second-year starter. And he's getting buzzed to be, potential top 5 pick in this upcoming year's draft. And there's just a consistency and a level of excellence that we know that we're going to get from him as long as he's on the field. And as great as Harold Perkins is, and as exciting as Harold Perkins is the most exciting player on this team. I think that's kind of undeniable. We're still not quite sure how well he's going to transition to this middle linebacker spot, right? He didn't take quite the step forward that we thought he'd maybe take last season. So there's still like little question marks with Harold, right? But with Will, to me at least, there was almost no question to me that he's going to be one of the best tackles in the country. And I voted for him as AP preseason first team All-American for a reason.
Yeah, and he's expected to be a top 5 pick. Reed, it is a solid choice.
I don't think it's a boring pick at all, Koki. I think one of the great thinkers of our time, Jim Harbaugh. He once said that offensive linemen are weapons, and I tend to agree with that. Will Campbell's as good as it gets. He having him in that spot, left tackle, is a luxury. It's going to help Garrett Nussmeier adjust to becoming a starter for the first time. It's going to help the run game. It's going to help sort of nullify some of the best pass rushers in the country that LSU will face. So having him is you don't think about him enough, and then that's a good thing, because if you're not thinking about the offensive line, then that means it's doing its job. So he's a luxury. LSU's going to have to figure out a plan for him after this season, because he'll certainly be off the draft, but now they have him, and I think they're pretty fortunate to have him. And Emory Jones as well, on the other side.
Sure. And Rab, if you're going to pick a position where your best player is, you probably pick quarterback first, but left tackle wouldn't be too far behind that. I mean, to have a star left tackle who's going to be a top 5 draft pick, that's a big deal.
We're just judging by the draft. You see how often teams pick a tackle, right? If they get that position, like Koki said, if he has the season we expect him to have, he's going to go very high in the draft next year. I go way back to 2 years ago when they had to start a freshman Will Campbell and a freshman Emory Jones at right tackle, and it's like, boy, this you're asking for it. Because in the SEC, to me, what is one of the things that made the SEC great? Great skill players, obviously, over the last 20 years, but great defensive line play. I mean, just dominating, fast, huge defensive linemen. And to be as consistent as they've been, and to have gone through all the battles that they've gone through now for two full seasons in the SEC, and now they're emerging as senior upperclassmen, and as Koki said, Will Campbell didn't give up a sack last year. I mean, that's utterly remarkable, considering the depth of talent and the quality of talent that you're going up against in this conference. So, it's I don't think Brian Kelly would say it's boring to have a player like Will Campbell at left tackle, and you could maybe make a case for a few other players, but I went with him too as being their best player. And why not?
When I said boring, I didn't mean that actually like watching him play and his play is boring. I'm just saying that like he's kind of the typical pick, right? In terms of just when you look at this LSU team, gun to your head who you're going to pick, it's going to be probably going to be Will Campbell. Yeah, he's the chalk pick. That's what I mean by boring.
And NFL GMs would agree with you, by the way, and so that's that's a good sign. The one person who did not pick Will Campbell, that's their answer to this question, by the way, was Wilson, who went with Harold Perkins. And I'll say this, if Harold Perkins is LSU's best player, I think that's good news for LSU. Do you guys agree?
Yeah, it means he's probably the best defensive player in the country, if not at least one of the best, if that's the case.
It means he's super disruptive, and it means that the defense creates a ton of pressure, and the defense, if it creates a ton of pressure, it's going to be a lot better than it was last year. So if he is indeed the best player, then that bodes well for LSU's playoff chances.
And he becomes like a pseudo leader, because I think Brian Kelly was talking about this yesterday in terms of him just, not just elevating his own play, but elevating the play around himself, right? And elevating the play of others. So all the great ones do that, right? You just pick a sport, right? Especially in basketball, we see that because of all the passing and the two-way play. But if he can do that and elevate the play of the others around him because of his own greatness, then that's just going to help LSU's defense, twofold outside of him just being disruptive. So
switching the conversation to the best breakout player at LSU, and I really thought this would elicit some varied responses. And again, 3 of the 4 of you mentioned Caleb Jackson, the running back. Rab, I guess that just goes to show how impressive Caleb Jackson is as sort of a. You can see the physical specimen that he is and see the way he plays in practice and imagine great things for this guy.
I mean, you get Leonard Fournette vibes when you watch him sometimes, and I'm not saying he's Leonard Fournette. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone. Maybe the greatest running back LSU ever had, but that was one of the first things I asked when I went out to practice yesterday. The one practice I got to go to this preseason camp. I said, "Has he been running over people?" I think I asked Reed, "Has he been running over people?" He said, "Yeah, a few times." So in practice, apparently he ran over one of the Weekses, right?
Whit Weeks took a pretty nice hit a couple weeks ago.
Obviously, he's you have to say he's the number 2 running back at this point, but he has the biggest upside and the biggest potential. And this is a team that is obviously Garrett Nussmeier is not going to rush for 1,000 yards like Jaden Daniels did last year. That's not his MO. That's not the way he wants to play the game. That's not what he's best at. So you don't want or expect that. So as I said in the movie Moneyball, they're going to have to recreate Jaden Daniels' stats in the aggregate, right? So they're going to have to. Y'all like that, huh?
They need their Jeremy Giambi.
Yeah, they need to recreate Giambi in the aggregate. So they got to get several guys to rush for those yards that Jaden took up last year, and he's got to be one of those players, and the upside I think is tremendous there for him, and he just is one of those guys. It's like when Koki and I are both big movie buffs. There's some people when you watch a movie, you're drawn to them every time they're in a scene. You're drawn to them every time he's on the field. I want to know what he's doing, where he's going, if he's in the backfield, if he is in motion or something like that. I want to know what Caleb Jackson is doing, because you never know what it's going to be. And I think since LSU needs a good solid running game to support Garrett Nussmeier this year as a passer, he's a huge player, and if he comes through like he can, like Harold Perkins can on defense, that's another huge plus for this team.
He strikes me, Reed, as the kind of player who, you get that double crowd pop. You know what I'm talking about? Where it's a good run and he's got an 8-yard run and the crowd kind of goes, and then he breaks a tackle or runs over somebody, and the crowd thinks the play's over and is quieted down, and then it's because it's a 32-yard run.
Yes.
We're going to see that from Caleb Jackson.
He is literally a loud football player, and what I mean by that is he creates noise, literal noise on the field. Like we were about 80 yards away, like the player we're talking about when he just leveled Whit Weeks. We were about 80 yards away from where it happened, and we could hear it. We could hear the pop, and it was very reminiscent of what he did at Mississippi State last year. That poor guy who he just he absolutely trucked on a run. So I think Caleb Jackson is the obvious choice. I didn't want to overthink it, but if I may, I can throw out another name who I considered real quick. Savion Jones.
I was glad you didn't steal Koki's, because Koki's the one who's different. So
I didn't have that one either.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'll just throw out Savion Jones. You look at him. He's got all the potential in the world. He's got great size, great length, and we talked to him a couple weeks ago, and you could see him thinking a lot more about the pass rush. You can see him imagining different things. You can see him developing on the field using those techniques that he's learned. So if you take his physical talent, right, his attributes, and then you combine that with greater technique, more pass rush wisdom, I guess, for lack of a better word, I think you could have a real combination of factors that can lead him toward a breakout season. So I'll just throw his name out here. I considered him, but I think Caleb Jackson was the obvious choice.
Yeah. Wilson also went with Caleb Jackson. Koki, you had a different name. You went with Kamorian Pimpton.
Yep. Yeah, I went Kamorian Pimpton.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah, I think LSU is going to run more 12 personnel this season, which is one running back, 2 tight ends, 2 receivers. And we saw that a lot. We've seen that more in practice this past week. And that sort of gave me the confidence to make this pick, because it really came down to him and Caleb, because it was like a playing time. The problem was Jackson's just going to play a lot more than Pimpton, so why are you going to pick Pimpton? But now I see that evening out a little bit because of the greater use of 12 personnel. Combine that with the fact that Garrett Nussmeier is just, I guess he's just more open, adept, whatever you want to call it, to throwing to tight ends than Jaden was, and using the seam a little bit more. So I think they're going to use more tight ends this season. We're seeing it already in practice. We're seeing Nussmeier's, I guess, openness to throwing to more tight ends. And if they're going to run the ball more and have this more traditional running style, it makes more sense to playing more tight ends, right? It gives you more versatility between the run and the pass. On any given down, and and in terms of Pimpton as a player, though, like I think we know just how ridiculous his catch radius is, how his size is obviously incredibly impressive, and the fact that he's also improved as a blocker this preseason as well. He just seems a lot more polished this preseason, and that gives me more confidence that he's going to play a lot more. And I think everyone was kind of drooling over him last year when he was just a freshman, but he just wasn't quite ready yet. He wasn't quite polished enough to play. But Brian Kelly's already said this as well, and that he's really taken a step forward this preseason. He's taken the next step that they wanted to see from him in terms of getting him on the field more often.
The play, I hope, is in Joe Sloan's playbook, is a button hook or a curl route to Kamorian Pimpton. Like when it's like 3rd and 4 and you need 6 yards, send him downfield and have him turn around and catch the ball. If Garrett can deliver the ball and he's got the linebacker on his back or the safety on his back, what are they going to do?
Yeah.
If you deliver the ball in that situation, it should be a first down. So I agree with you. I was drooling over him last year in preseason camps. Like, this kid is going to be great. He's got the size and all the things, and he never quite developed as a freshman. But yeah, that's a good one. I like Kamorian Pimpton.
Can I throw out another name? And I'd probably give you guys grief if you had picked this because it's sort of bending the rules. But since nobody said it, what about Garrett Nussmeier as a breakout player? I mean, the guy has only started once in his career. I think he's obviously well known around LSU. How well known is he nationally? This is a good player who, if Jaden Daniels had not been the quarterback, if he didn't have the Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback last year, people might be looking at quarterback as like a strength on this team. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I think if he does have a really good season, I think it becomes a really cool story. Because when you think about who he is, where he's from Lake Charles. That's the place he considers home. He lived, all over the country as a kid because his dad was a football coach, but he considers himself a Louisiana native, and he stuck around through coaching changes, through Jaden Daniels' ascension. He stuck around for this opportunity to be the starter at LSU because he wanted to be the quarterback at LSU and represent the place he considers home. So I think it'd be a really cool story if he goes out and throws, like we were talking about on Tuesday, for 4,000 plus yards, leads LSU into the playoff. Yeah, it could be really exciting to watch him blossom and to get national people noticing the story and to pick up on, what kind of a cool story it would be.
Okay, so 10 days away from the season opener, we kind of talked about the players, and we followed this team since training camp started 3 weeks ago today. Let's put it all together and kind of do final record projections, SEC record, where they finish. We all actually landed on one of 2 records. So again, there's consensus here too. Boy, we're going to look either really smart or really stupid on this show. We've all got either 9-3 or 10-2. So Rab, where did you land on your final projection?
10-2, and again, this illustrates how important the USC game is. They got to get off to a good start because the SEC schedule is so difficult. They've got Oklahoma at home, Alabama at home, Ole Miss. They go to Texas A&M. These are the big games this year. I don't think anyone's getting through the SEC undefeated. Georgia, anybody. I don't think anyone is. And so you can't drop that first game and have much margin for error. So I went with 10-2 overall, 6-2 in conference. Split the games with Ole Miss and Alabama at home, and maybe that A&M's been a tough place for them to win lately, and they're just good enough to beat you if you're not playing well. So they're gonna have a week where just something doesn't go right. The offense doesn't click. The defense is giving up a lot of points again. So I think 10-2 puts you in the conversation. I think that's where we see the preseason rankings with the coaches poll and the AP poll, where they rank 12th and 13th respectively. People think LSU's got a shot. They're right in the hunt, but not solidly in the college football playoff. 10-2 puts them right there with a chance to be in that playoff.
Yeah, and we'll talk about our chances for them to make the playoff here in a minute. But, man, I agree with you in that USC game is so important, guys, that if you can win it, all of a sudden the rest of your really tough games outside, I guess, A&M are at home. And LSU will probably be favored in either 10 or 11 games. Not sure if they'll be favored at home against Ole Miss. They probably are underdogs against Alabama. Possibly, you're looking at 1 point, 2 points either way at A&M. But they're going to be favored in 10 or 11 games. The question is, can they avoid slip-ups, Reed?
Yeah, I think when you look at the schedule, Ole Miss, there's a real good chance if LSU beats USC, there's a real good chance they're undefeated going into that game against Ole Miss. And a lot of people forget LSU has a bye week before that game against Ole Miss. So they've got an extra week to get healthy to focus on Ole Miss. That could really be a game that defines the season, right? You win that game, then all of a sudden you're thinking about the SEC championship. You're thinking about the playoff. But if you lose it, then that sort of indicates that you're going to be out on the outside looking in. You got to beat Alabama. You got to beat A&M. You got to beat all these other teams to sort of get yourself back in that conversation. So I think that Ole Miss game is really important, and it's the one that we're all circling on our calendars. And I think LSU is probably going to be an underdog, but again, that could change if they beat USC and then they run the table through that first stretch of the season. So I went with 9-3. Just because I see LSU being underdogs in two of their games at least, and then you got to factor in maybe a loss that you don't expect. So that's where I'm at, and we'll see how the first stretch of the season goes.
And we saw this, Koki. We talked about it Tuesday. The win total, depending on where you look, is either 9 or 9.5. Do you go over that or under that? That's really what we're asking here.
On this podcast, I said push at 9, and now I'm a fraud because I just picked them to go 10-2.
You found another win in the last 2 days.
Yeah, I did find another one. Just thinking about it from a bigger picture standpoint, like I understand what Rab's saying that they have a difficult SEC schedule. Well, it's not. It's not easy compared to the average college Power 4 schedule. I almost said Power 5. It's Power 4. Rest in peace to the Pac-12. And anyway, yeah. So like I just think it does. I just think their SEC schedule does kind of pan out pretty well for them, because if you look at a lot of their tougher SEC games are just at home, right? Ole Miss is at home, Alabama's at home, Oklahoma's at home at the very end of the season, and they catch Oklahoma after they have a really, really brutal stretch. I wrote this down here. Oklahoma finishes out the season at Missouri, home against Alabama, at LSU. So you're catching them at a really good spot. And again, the Alabama game's at home, the Ole Miss game's at home. They're at Texas A&M, which is a game that I think they could definitely lose. That's a really good Texas A&M team, top 20 quality team, at least in my opinion. And then there's also this USC game. But I think them and USC are similar in a lot of ways, right? Like third-year head coach. First year starting quarterback, defenses that are going under an identity change. I just think LSU has the better roster, and they're just in a better spot in that sort of similar cycle. So I look at all this stuff, and I just kind of lean. Now I'm kind of leaning closer to them being 3-2 in those games instead of being 2-3 in those games. And if Brian Kelly's history, if history says anything about Brian Kelly, he can win the games that he's very reliable winning the games that he should win. And all the other games on their schedule are games that I think they should win. So I take that all together, and I'm just leaning at 10-2.
Yeah, Brian Kelly has an exceptional record when he's the favorite in Las Vegas. Like that is one of his strengths as a coach, is taking care of business. If they can do that, 10-2 is very much on the table, which means the college football playoff's right on the table. And we're going to talk about LSU's chances in the college football playoff as well as the rest of the SEC teams. First, I want to do our sports betting segment with Thomas Casale. The Queen of Baton Rouge proudly sponsors the LSU Sports Insiders sports betting segment. Experience the thrill of game day at 1717 Kitchen and Cocktails, your premier destination for elevated sports entertainment. This week, Thomas is telling us about that Saturday game in Dublin, Georgia Tech versus Florida State, and what he thinks you can do to get started with a win in your college football betting season.
Thanks, guys. Well, we get college football season started this Saturday. A little taste in week 0 before our first full slate of the year next week. The premier game on Saturdays, Florida State and Georgia Tech. We've seen a lot of line movement in this game. At DraftKings, it opened up Florida State minus 13.5. Now it's down to 10.5. We've seen a lot of money come in on Georgia Tech over this past week. I actually leaned Georgia Tech when it was 13.5. I thought that was a little high. Now that it's down to 10.5, I don't think there's as much value taking the underdog. I'll tell you what bet I would look for in this game. You know, Florida State, they've lost a lot of experience. They're going to Ireland. They could start this game off slow. That tends to happen in these games that are overseas. I would look for a Florida State second half bet. If this game's close at halftime or Florida State's losing, I think they get it rolling in the second half. So that's my recommendation for the opening game of the college football season. Look for a Florida State second half wager.
Tiger fans, you can catch all the sports action at the Queen Casino's DraftKings Sportsbook Bar and 1717 Kitchen and Cocktails. With top-notch screens and live betting, it's the ultimate spot to watch your favorite teams and enjoy a cold brew or signature cocktail. The Queen Casino is the only land-based casino in Baton Rouge and your go-to for game day or any day. Visit today and elevate your sports watching experience. All right, so shifting the conversation more to the national side, guys, as Thomas got us started with there. The big question, can LSU make the playoff? Rab, you mentioned it, ranked 12th in one poll, 13th in the other. Would not be good enough to make the playoff if you finish the year there, because you're going to have some automatic bids. A group of 5 team may not be in the top 12 unless you have Big 12 champ, ACC champ. Big 10 and SEC champ will be in the top 12, but the other 2 and the group of 5 champ all in the top 12. 12's not good enough. You probably need to be top 10 to make it in. So the way we phrase this is who makes the cut, and we're going to start with which SEC teams you all think will make the college football playoff, and then we'll hone in on LSU. Who Makes the Cut segment is proudly sponsored by Associated Grocers. Join our team and support the success of local independent retail grocers. Apply today for available positions at Associated Grocers. So let's go through the room one by one. Koki, we'll start with you. Who from the SEC do you have reaching the college football playoff?
Yeah, I went with Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas, and Missouri.
Okay. Probably 3 there that a lot of people have their favor to make. Missouri, kind of like LSU, I think they're ranked 11th preseason, so they're kind of on the bubble too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just love Missouri's offense. I just think they're going to have a potential top 5 offense in the country this season. I mean, last year was like a borderline top 10 unit, and they bring pretty much everybody back. They lost a couple pieces on the offensive line, but they did a good job of sort of reloading at that spot through the transfer portal. Obviously, Brady Cook's coming back. Luther Burden's coming back. He's going to be one of the best receivers in the country, another potential top 5 pick. I'm just super duper high on their offense. And defensively, there's a lot. That's sort of the question mark with this team a little bit.
Lost Blake Baker.
Yeah, they lost Blake Baker. That's one. They lost Kevin Caples.
Two
That's
corners
2.
to the NFL.
2
Chris
corners in the
Abrams
NFL.
and Ennis Rakestraw, yep.
And Darius Robinson, their best pass rusher, he's gone as well. So they lost quite a bit to the NFL. They lost quite a bit to LSU in terms of from a coaching perspective. But at the same time, like I don't think the roster is a disaster either. And I just sort of have faith that they'll be able to do enough there that they're not going to be, say, LSU bad last season in terms of defensively or anywhere that close to that. So as long as they're competent defensively, I think the offense is so good that they're going to win so many games. Also, their schedule is I wouldn't say it's easy because there's no such thing as an easy schedule in the SEC, but it might be the easiest among all the other SEC schedules. I mean, the only tough games that I was able to sort of Fine, when I listed it out, was at Texas A&M, at Alabama, and Oklahoma at home. Really, every other game, they're, I'd say, at least a touchdown favorite.
And that's an interesting point, too, because as we get into the playoff discussion, could a again, not a weak schedule, it's still an SEC schedule, but a weaker schedule, if you go 10-2 and you're Missouri, does that hurt you? Because you don't have the signature win.
That's fair.
Because there's going to be a group of 5 or 6 10-2 teams, and maybe 3 of them make the playoff between the Big Ten and the SEC. So then you look at it and say, okay, well, you lost to Alabama, you lost to Texas A&M, so your best win is Oklahoma. I mean, I don't know if that gets you in. So that's going to be the question mark.
But I just think there's more paths to them getting 2 wins out of those 3 than there is for, say, LSU or Oklahoma or Tennessee to win the majority of the tough games that they have, right? And that's kind of what that's probably the best way to boil down my thinking, because I kind of went through each team's schedule, like the top 9 or 10 or so teams in the SEC, their schedules, and just seeing how which tough teams they have to face against, because a lot of this comes down to just how your schedule bakes out, right? For example, I think Alabama's a top 10 team in the country. I didn't pick them because I just think their schedule is really, really tough. Well, and they got a really tough draw with road games and all these sort of little things. And I know this is probably overanalyzing this whole thing, but at the same time, I think the schedule matters.
Well, it does, and there's also going to be some team and I'll just throw out South Carolina because LSU plays South Carolina. What if they're a lot better than people thought? What if they end up being 9-3 and that's a really good win at the end of the year? We don't know.
Yeah,
there's teams like that every year, and I'm not necessarily saying I think the Gamecocks will be that good, but somebody will be that we don't expect. It was Missouri last year, by the way. Somebody will be really good that we don't expect. Reed, moving on to you. I think you were the only one who had 5 SEC teams making the CFP.
And this would be a good sort of segue to talk about Alabama. I think the SEC is good enough to get 5 in. I had Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas, Alabama, and Missouri. I'm also high on Missouri for all the reasons Koki outlined. But Alabama, I think I used to be a little lower on them, but I think I've come around to them. I think your opinion on them sort of depends on what you think about Jalen Milroe. And I really like Jalen Milroe. I see a lot of potential in him. Last year, he was a pretty good downfield passer, but he kind of struggled in the short to intermediate areas. Obviously, a dynamic runner, a super duper athlete. I see a path to him becoming a Heisman Trophy candidate, maybe a top 10 pick in the draft, if he can improve as a passer a little bit. And so I think if he makes those strides, kind of similar to what we saw with Jaden Daniels last year, when you combine that passing ability with his rushing ability, you've got a super dangerous offense. You've got a guy who's going to be leading the Heisman discussion, and you've got a team that can be in the playoff. It hasn't lost that much talent from Nick Saban. I think Kalen DeBoer is a good coach. I think he helps quarterbacks a lot. So I'm higher on them than most, and I think they absolutely have a shot to get in. And I think the SEC is good enough to get 5 teams in.
Wilson has 4, and it's kind of a combination of y'all's picks. He went with Georgia, Texas, Alabama, and Ole Miss as his 4. Those are probably the 4 most likely. Rab, you had another name on your list that I think folks might be interested in.
I said LSU is going to make it. I had Ole Miss, Texas, Georgia, and LSU. I see the LSU-Alabama game as a playoff game.
Round of 16.
It's going to come down to that. Yeah, it's going to be that late. It's an early November game where teams are jockeying for position and you're weeding out the contenders, and it's certainly a game that could go either way. But I think LSU, at home has a bit of an advantage over Alabama, and I think Alabama is very good too. They still have a great roster, and I think Kalen DeBoer is a very good coach. But they're just going to be missing just that little extra edge, right? That's going to cost them. I think in the SEC with all these tough games and tough road games they have to play. So I'm going with LSU. I figured there weren't going to be a lot of picks for LSU. I had to give LSU a chance. If they go 10-2, as I said, they're going to need some help probably to get in. But what if they? I was on Sirius Radio the other day, and Peter Burns asked me if you could pick anyone if LSU hosts a college football playoff game in December, a first round game, you could pick anyone to be the opponent. What would you say? And I think the easy pick is to say Notre Dame. I said Michigan because they're coming off the national championship. And LSU has never ever played Michigan in football. That's the one national power LSU has never played, and I think that would be unbelievable.
Make it.
Now Notre Dame would be great too, but with all the Brian Kelly storylines. But I went with those 4 teams. and I'm pointing the fickle finger of fate right at Ole Miss, right? They have not won the SEC since 1963. If not now, when? Because they have gone all in. They've broken the bank for transfers and and NIL players and stuff like that. All right, Ole Miss, this is your chance to do it, to finally prove that you're one of the big boys. Never been to the SEC championship game. Hasn't won the SEC in 61 years. Are you finally going to do it? Let's see.
One thing, I am so damn excited. Pardon mon français, but I am so damn excited about this season because I think the 12-team playoff is just a game changer. I mean, like, even with a 4-team playoff, you lost one game early in the season and you're staring at, we got to run the table and get some help. You lost 2, you could pretty much forget. Now, two lost teams got in, once in a blue moon, but like you were pretty much done. Now you lose 2 and you're still in it. You're 6-2 going into November. You got a real shot at this thing. You can see the finish line if you could run the table and be in that bubble conversation. I'm really excited for it. So, moving the conversation from which SEC teams make it to what LSU's chances are, guys. And Rab, you just said you thought they had it, but you also put what'd you put 35%?
35%.
35%. So and the rest of us were in that neighborhood too. I think ranging between a 20% chance and a 40% chance that LSU makes it. Like, it could happen, Reed. But they're going to need some things to go their way. They're going to have to play well too.
I see the path for sure. I pegged it at 40%. Not even odds on the outside looking in. A couple things need to break right to get them in. I think the offense, like I mentioned Tuesday, I think the offense is going to be great. I think Garrett Nussmeier looks confident, comfortable. The receivers all look good. The offensive line we know is going to be one of the best in the country. But I do have some lingering concerns about the defense. Not that I don't think they can improve a good bit, but I need to see it. Right? We still have questions about the secondary, how they can play man coverage. We still have questions about the pass rush. Can they really be more disruptive than they were last season? We don't know. I need to see it in a game situation. So maybe my opinion changes once we see how they look against USC. But I still think I still have too many questions to really put them into the playoff right now. I think they're close, but I just don't think they're there yet. And so that's why I said 40-ish%.
The USC game, and we'll talk a lot about it next week, but the USC game is so vital because, first of all, as you said, it's going to let us know really what this team is off the bat. Second of all, I don't know that if you lose a non-conference game, you have a chance at the playoff anymore. Because then you're looking at, you better go 7-1 in the SEC.
Yep. And
probably win the SEC title game. That's a tall order at that point. So the margin for error, even in a 12-team playoff, Koki, is pretty thin.
Yeah, absolutely. I went with 30% in terms of LSU's chances of making the playoff because there's just so many outside factors that we're not going to be able to predict and so many different teams that are going to be in the hunt that it kind of lowers the percentage from, closer to 50-50 to something around the 30% range, just in my opinion. Because you're not just talking about the blue bloods, an Alabama or even a Michigan or a Clemson, right? We're talking about teams like Kansas State having a real shot now, teams like Arizona in the Big 12, right? Can a smaller conference like that, steal a second bid because they unexpectedly win the Big 12 championship
and somebody else is sitting there at 11-1.
Right.
Yeah. So and then you have to pick those two teams. So that's kind of what I came down to in terms of not choosing LSU to be one of those teams that make the playoffs. That's why I went with 4 SEC teams instead of 5. So it was that close for me. So all these little permutations are kind of mostly why I kind of dipped it closer to 30% instead of 40 or 50%. But I would echo pretty much everything that Reed said in terms of just LSU as a team, in terms of evaluating them in the bigger picture of the national landscape.
Yeah, and Wilson went with 25% for the record. We're all in the same neighborhood. I think, when you look at the number of power conference teams there are, which is 67 or something like that now, 68, only 12 are going to make it. Actually, only 11 of those teams will make it because there's one group of 5 teams. So that's like a 15% chance per team. Obviously, we think LSU is better than an average Power 5 team, but the chances for anybody to go into the playoff saying, oh, that's definitely the expectation this year. Well, you're either Georgia or Ohio State, or you're kind of are you sure about over 50-50 is tough to get to when we're talking about that number of teams competing for 11 spots. So our Who Makes the Cut segment was brought to you by Associated Grocers. Tiger fans, Associated Grocers is hiring. Join a team committed to the success of independent retail grocers. Apply today at Associated Grocers and be part of something great. I'm going to wrap things up today with a little CFP talk, your Final Four, and your national champion. First of all, Rab, I'm curious because you've covered college football longer than any of us. Maybe combined. I don't know.
Definitely combined.
I had to throw that in there. I had to throw that in there.
Yeah, when I mentioned 2022, I was like, well, I'm these guys remember 2022.
I was here for that.
Oh, okay.
I did just turn 40, so I'm not the. You used to call me young Zach. I'm not the young guy anymore. I am curious to know your thoughts on this change, though. A lot of people see this as a positive, exciting change for college football. I'm one of them. Are you one of them?
I am, but I'm still a guy who wants the bowls to be part of this thing. And there's a lot of talk going forward that you may only end up with the national championship game being played at a neutral site. And what's that going to mean for the Sugar Bowl and the Orange Bowl and the Rose Bowl and things like that? And people can say, well, that's progress. Then you just have the NFL light. You have the NFL type scenario, and college football's always been different. So I'm concerned about that, but I think it's going to be tremendously exciting, and I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how exciting these on-campus first-round games are, because the quarterfinals, the semis, and of course the national championship game will be played at bowl games. And is that the way it's going to be going forward? Or is that going to change? So yeah, it's tremendously exciting. I'm less excited about all the realignment and the mergers and the demise of the Pac-12. Oklahoma's not playing Oklahoma State this year. There's no bedlam with college football this year. Washington's not playing Washington State for the Apple Cup. These are sad things. Or is Oregon playing Oregon State? I'm not entirely sure.
I think they are.
Okay,
yeah.
but that's maybe one of the rare ones that now Texas and Texas A&M are coming back together because Texas joined the SEC. But I wonder if we're gonna look up 20 years from now, and people are gonna say, "What did we do to college sports, to college athletics?" And so I'm a little pensive because of that. But in general, about the playoff and expanding, yeah, I think it's probably a good thing, and it's only going to ramp up the excitement about an already exciting sport.
Yeah, conference realignment is a separate discussion, but I think the playoff it's going to keep more teams, more fan bases engaged. I also think we've talked about this before too, guys. There is going to be a little bit of this is a pass-fail grade. If you didn't make the playoff this season, was a failure, especially at a school like LSU. And
not a little, totally.
Yeah, I don't know that that's always going to be fair, because 9-3 is a pretty good season, or at least it used to be. I'm not sure it is anymore. Or if you go 10-2 but miss the playoff, is that still a good season? I don't know. So the Sugar Bowl this year is a quarterfinal. The semifinals are the Cotton Bowl and the Orange Bowl. And then the championship is in Atlanta. So let's go around the room. Final four picks, Koki, and your national champion.
Yeah, I went with Ohio State, Georgia, Oregon, and Texas, and my national champion is Ohio State.
Okay.
I think Ohio State has the best roster, top to bottom, in the country. Will Howard's the only, I guess, quote unquote, question mark with this team. How will he fare piloting the most talented offense in the nation around him? But I just the pure fact that he has so many great weapons and such a great team around him will probably help him. So I'm pretty confident that he's an upgrade for them at quarterback regardless. And because of that, I have them at number one. And I still have some small questions marks about Georgia, like with their receiving core and like a couple other small things. But I think that's kind of the difference between Ohio State and Georgia for me. And then with Texas and Oregon, I kind of played this out in terms of like putting every team into seeds and just going through the bracket, and Oregon and Texas were the teams that kind of came out of that. Oregon, I think, is a really great team. I think besides Georgia and Ohio State, if you had to pick another team that probably is over an 80% chance of making the playoff, it would be Oregon, because I just think that their schedule, I mean, they should. I would be shocked if they had more than like one or two losses this season, and I just think their roster is incredible. I think they probably have the best quarterback in the country this season. And with Texas, I don't know. The bracket shook out pretty well for them, and they're obviously a really good team.
All right, Wilson, similar: Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, and Utah, and he had Ohio State winning the championship. So Utah out of the Big 12. Reed, what did you come down with?
All right, so I went with Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, and I'm already starting to get some cold feet with this, but I went with Ole Miss. I'm high on Ole Miss. Rab's kind of scaring me off, saying they haven't won an SEC championship since 1963.
1963.
I really didn't consider that, but I'm high on them this season. I think they have a lot of talent. I think their schedule lines up well. I think every time you bring back your quarterback and sort of give him weapons like they have, I think that's a really positive sign. That makes me think that you're ready to build on last season and get into the playoff. And I think combine that, the returning production on offense, established play caller coach Lane Kiffin and the work they did in the transfer portal, and the way the schedule lines up, I see a path to them getting to the playoff. But
a lot of people just turned off this feed, by the way.
I don't.
It's okay.
I don't feel great about it. The pivotal game is at LSU. I think when they go on the road, play LSU, they win that game, then you can see the momentum start to roll toward them getting in. So that's you might disagree with me, but
it's super interesting because there's two different discussions here. My national title pick is Georgia. Georgia has a tremendously difficult schedule. But it's hard.
Georgia could lose 2 games and be out.
Right, they could. But if they get in, let's say they lose 2 and they get in as the 7 seed. You think the 2 seed's going to want to play that team? Like they could get in as the 7 seed and then win the whole thing. Right. They get a home game in the first round. They don't get the bye if that's the case. But the 2 seed is Ohio State or something. Georgia, Ohio State in the quarterfinals. Like we could certainly see something like that. So Georgia's my pick. But Rob, I'm going to let you finish up your final 4 and your championship pick.
Yeah, a little boring, but then one outlier. My final 4 is Ohio State, Georgia, Oregon, and Kansas State. I was glad Koki mentioned Kansas State earlier. No particular reason, although they do have a very good quarterback in Avery Johnson, not the Southern University and NBA basketball great, but another Avery Johnson, the ponytailed quarterback, and they're just that solid, consistent program that punches above their weight class all the time, and I could just see them getting in the playoff and knocking someone off, and then winning a couple of games. So I just wanted to pick someone different. Quite honestly, I didn't want to go just all chalk.
There is going to be some team at least in the quarterfinals, maybe not the semis, but the who's like, not ranked in the preseason poll. Like, where do they come from? And that is what is so great about this. And that team is going to have a 1 in 8 chance at the national title.
And Ohio State, I also said over Oregon as a national.
I
champion.
also had Ohio State. So
Ohio State, national championship picks. I think we had 3 Ohio States. I'm going to go Georgia. Georgia lost a game.
Yeah,
they're going to be like ticked off for 3 years about losing 1 game. So look out for Georgia. And I really do think you're right, Rab. Their schedule is so difficult. You could drop a couple games. And then you're the 2 seed, and you're looking up at Georgia's in your bracket, and you're going,
Thanks
that's our reward for going 13-0. Like we got Georgia as the 7 seed. So you could definitely see stuff like that. As you can tell, we're excited about it. That's our show for today. Our thanks to our sponsors, Waste Pro, Baton Rouge Clinic, all the others. Our thanks also Scott Rabalais, Reed Darcey, Koki Riley, our beat writers, our columnist, and behind the glass, we had Alex Lee and Amelia Cotton. I'm Zach Ewing. This has been the LSU Sports Insider. For Thursday, August the 22nd, it's football time, baby. We'll be back next week, and we'll dig in on LSU USC. We'll see you then.